Everly, the first time I saw your father, it was in grad school, in a screenwriting class of all places. He was sitting across the room, hiding behind his MacBook. My first thought was that he looked like he'd stumbled out of the 1990s grunge era with his dirty blue jeans and flannel shirt, and I kind of loved that. It didn't take long for your father to show me that he had all sorts of different sides. He was brilliant, fun-loving, adventurous, and so incredibly charming. Together it felt like we were unstoppable. And it didn't take long for me to fall completely head over feet. I had never believed in the concept of another person completing another until your father. I still remember the first day I met your sister and brother. I couldn't get over how much I felt for Maggie and Zayden from the beginning. I could just feel your father in them. The day your father asked me to spend the rest of our lives together was the happiest day of my life, or so it felt. It was March 19th, and we were sitting on our dock over Lake Norman. It was the dock we used to end each of our afternoon runs. That day was unbelievably windy, but it was the first time Charlotte had seen sun and a little bit of warmth in a long time. It was beautiful. Shortly after that moment, your father and I closed on our first home together. It would also be your first home. That house will always be so important to us. And 2 short months later, your father and I were married right there in our backyard. It was a beautiful ceremony, Everly. It really was. Remember when I said the day your father proposed was the happiest day of my life? Well, our wedding trumped it. It was sunny all the way through the I do's, and afterwards it poured the rain all night long, all over our reception. But it didn't matter. It was perfect. That day we officially became a family. But this Everly, this is the moment we learned that you were going to be joining our little family. We were so ecstatic, and our excitement only grew as you grew inside of me. It was all so surreal, feeling you move around in there. And after what seemed like years, but was really only 9 months, you entered our lives full force. I couldn't believe how much I loved you immediately, how full I felt holding you in my arms. You were so beautiful. I mean, you were a real human being with 10 little fingers and 10 little toes. And we made you, your father and I. You were the two of us. It was incredible. You should have seen the look on your grandmother's face the first time she saw you. You were their first grandbaby, and they couldn't have been more in love. But nobody could have been more smitten with you than your father and me. I was so anxious right out of the gate about motherhood. I didn't know what I was doing, but your father was a pro. You were everything we could have hoped for. We couldn't stop holding you. I didn't even sleep those first few nights. Instead, I just watched your tiny chest rise and fall while you slept. We brought you home from the hospital on Valentine's Day. It was our most memorable one to date. You spent a lot of time sleeping in those days. We had to wake you up to eat every single time. We probably should have rested more in those days, but you were so cute it was hard not to just stare at you. Eventually, exhaustion took over and we started sleeping again, just in time for you to decide sleeping was no longer your idea of a good time. But your father was wonderful during these moments. I used to wake up to find your father reading you books in the nursery. He loved those moments, and so did you. You were such a sweet baby. And you made the funniest faces ever, especially if we woke you up anytime you dozed off. You were a quick learner, too. Before you were a month old, you were picking your little head up all on your own. We were so impressed by you, Miss Everly. But we weren't alone. Your great-grandparents were amazed by you. To watch them hold you was remarkable. They were so in love with you. You were the whole world to our little family. I loved those moments, every single one. I loved the way it felt when you looked up at us with your big blue eyes. I saw so much of your father in you early on. You were a spitting image of him with your light features. You even had your father's cowlicks, which we teased you would grow to hate later on. But I also loved how similar you were to your father. The moments I watched your father hold you in his arms, I felt so overjoyed I could just burst. It was incredible to see so much of the man that I loved in my little girl. You, Everly Jane, you are our whole world. You gave our lives extraordinary purpose. You were the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me.